we're going to be talking today about different ways we've been creating music together, ways we've been structuring music, and then thinking about how you could also do that in your own daily life. And Joe, is there anything you wanted to say about what you've learned about restorative music in the last couple of years of working on this?
Um, a lot. It depends on what kind of restoration I'm looking for. Sometimes it's like background music while I'm working on stuff, and sometimes I need to stop thinking about everything I'm doing and just listen to stuff to just kind of ease my brain up from thought process and just go into a different language, the language of music. And sometimes for me, well, as a composer, sometimes composing can be restorative to me from everything else I'm doing. So it depends on what I'm looking for with the restorative, with using music to restore what I'm doing. Most of the time, I'm working hard at whatever I'm working, and I just have to take a break and listen to different types of music for anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes, kind of just take me out of the zone and kind of restore a new approach, a perspective approach, and then go back into it. So it just depends on what kind of restoration I need at the time.
Well, and that fits in perfectly with this slide about we need to find the healing chords that soothe our body and soul in that particular moment. Sometimes it might be a very jazzy thing. Sometimes it might be more of the kind of restorative music that we would think of with meditations. And so we're going to be talking about how we do that. These are the benefits of restorative music that you're probably familiar with, like the music you might hear in meditations, where it slows our heart rate down to create ease in our bodies. It increases our ability to focus on complex work, and it expands our creativity. And it's not just that calm music that does those last two things. Classical music has been shown to be very helpful with creativity and restoration. And what we want to do is to help you think through this month what types of music and rhythms give your life greater excitement, satisfaction, comfort, ease, and more of the qualities you want in a restorative lifestyle. And so here's some ideas about things that you probably or could be doing to restore yourself already. Maybe you play an instrument. This is where, when I was learning to play the piano with Joe, practicing music was my big thing at that time of doing restorative music. And then listening to music to relax. You talked about that a little bit before. Then there's specific music to heal your soul. Like this is some of those Tibetan bowls that you hit to get the beautiful resonant sounds. There's all kinds of different kinds of restorative music that you can work with. And we're going to be talking a little bit about our kinds of music in a few seconds. I don't know if there's anything else we missed here about how do we restore ourselves already, but you talked about a few of those too, Joel.
Yeah.
And now we wanted to take some time quickly today to talk about how we compose restorative music for the Mindful Earthkeeper. And this is mostly for you, those of you who might be musically talented or curious and just want to understand how we do it. And so this is where Joe is going to be chiming in more because he does a lot of music creation. And it looks so easy there with the little coffee cup and the keyboard and that thing in our picture. But you know, Joe, that it can be very challenging at times. And these are 4 of the ways in which we work on restorative music and how we create it. And there might be others that if you come up with them as we talk, Joe, feel free to throw them in. But inspiration, we purposely put in pauses at times to make the music slower because we were trying to help people lower their heart rate. Then there's the creativity aspect of it. And then there's this thing called Sunglands, which is this work that I've been working on with Joe for several years. And it interweaves its way into the Mindful Earthkeeper because some of the melodies are just really beautiful or restorative. And so I'm throwing that in there as well. And I don't know if you'd like to talk a little bit about music for meditations and particularly the music to work by, because that was really your idea, Joe, the music to work by, of that some of our songs were really not quite suited for meditation, but they were really good for music to work by. If you want to say anything about that.
Yeah, I think the meditation music is more of a just sounds that kind of complement the words that you're speaking, and it's not necessarily commanding your attention to be like, hey, listen to me, listen to this beautiful melody or these wonderful chord changes. It's more of a sound wall kind of thing, just appropriately placed. Musical motifs, just short little ideas that complement what it is that you're saying. And some of the music that we created for that was a little bit more of the, hey, listen to me, I can exist on my own without the words. And that's kind of like more of the music to work by, where it's not necessarily commanding all your attention. It's good background stuff, but if you were listening to words on top of it, it might be conflicting. So I think music to work by is somewhere between like a sound wall and something that could be, pretty elaborate music with gorgeous melodies and wonderful chord changes. Somewhere in between there is music to work by.
That sounds like a good description of it.
Yeah.
And I like what you're saying about, hey, listen to me. Because sometimes you'd create these really beautiful pieces, and then I would try to put a meditation over it, and it would be hard to hear my voice, even though I would be paying attention to the music instead of what I was saying. So it was that's when I think we really came up with that kind of concept of doing it that way.
Right.
And then moving into this is kind of builds on what you said there. What we found, I think, this is kind of an inspirational personal process for us, but this is also something that you can think about in your own restorative music journey and practices of what are beautiful rhythms of healing for you? What does that mean for you? We've made our own choices about that, and we listen to certain patterns and say, we think that's a really rhythmic healing piece. And then we also tend to use I tend to love to create modal music. I don't seem to be able to create diatonic music if my life depends on. So a lot of the stuff that I would create ends up being very modal. But then Joe will sometimes work with diatonic pieces, and then also we'll work on chord progressions. And so we work from a certain composition piece. And I didn't mention this, I can't believe in the beginning, that Joe has a degree in music composition. So you know something about this, unlike me, who does not. I'm learning, but I don't know as much as Joe at all about that. And then it was talking about that sound wall. So sometimes you just put a lot of music together in a sort of a sound wall, which doesn't have a particularly musical phrasing to it. It doesn't have a musical progression in terms of even rhythm or chord progressions, but it sounds good. And I don't know if that's if you have any other ideas about how to describe what we.
No, I think that's exactly right. I think what you just described is perfect.
Cool. So we just wanted to share these ideas, and you may have others about inspiration, what inspires you. And then we really do specifically and have specifically looked at pauses. This was something we were doing more when I was doing something I called the restorative pause, which was kind of a project of its own. And that's when we were doing a lot of meditation music. And we're going to this year be pulling out a lot of what we created, or at least we're going to try to, the best of the things that we created in the last couple of years that have these kinds of more pause focused music. And we'll see if we can do restorative pause in a sense again.
Yeah, I want to add something there, if you don't mind. Pauses in particular is an interesting concept because, when your listeners are listening to whatever words you're saying in your meditations or some of your helpful videos, you have to put enough pause in there for the person who's the listener to kind of reflect and say, wait, what? And then process in their brain, their perception of what it is that you're saying. And that's where the ideas come to life, is with those pauses when people have a chance to, kind of feel what it is that you're saying or relate to it in some way. And that's when you're speaking your words, then those pauses can be very effective for people to kind of digest or process what it is that you're trying to help them with. Well, the same thing with music. There's a famous quote, we've talked about it many times, from Debussy, who says that music is really the space between the notes. If he appropriately puts ideas in your head, little motifs and a beautiful change, but then gives it enough space for the people kind of be there and process what it is that they just heard, that is powerful for to feel and to process. So I mean, language, English language and music are both languages, and the pauses in those languages can help you to perceive what it is that you're trying to get them to perceive. So pauses can be a very important part of this restorative process, because that's where the real work happens inside individual brains that helps them restore.
Mhm.
So I think pauses is
Well
an
said.
interesting concept. Yeah.
Thanks for I reminded me of that debate Debussy quote. I forgot about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
But that is something we really worked on for quite a while. Creativity is something we've also done some meditation series on creativity a couple years ago, and I'm going to try to pull some of that back and do that later this year in respect to mindful earthkeeping. But music is a big piece of creativity, I think. And these are some ideas about how you can work with creativity and music. And then Joe, feel free to chime in anything else that we didn't put up here. But how does music affect your creativity? You may not even notice it. If it's not something that you've been doing a lot recently, or you've forgotten that you do it, is just maybe take a chance this next month of April. This could be your entire April restorative pause, is to look at how music affects your creativity. Don't try to change it, just see, does it affect you? Another thing you could do in April is to make a list of all of your musical resources that could be creativity tools. You could also think of them, you could also make a list about how the ones that would be healing tools. But creativity is something that I wanted to throw out here specifically, because a lot of times we don't really put these two together. And then consider how restorative music improves your relationships and creative connections. Sometimes if you have some music going on when you're trying to have a meeting with someone, it can actually help your connection. It depends on what you're doing, but it's just something to consider. These are all little things you could do to be more creatively, musically restorative this month. Did you have any other thoughts on music and creativity? It really goes along with your home music to work by idea.
Are you asking me?
Yeah, I mean,
yeah, I've watched it in you.
Yeah, it's true.
When I've composed something, you'll kind of steer me in a direction of what you're trying to get, and I'll work on it for a while, and then I'll present it to you, and you listen to it, and then all of a sudden I can see your brain saying, oh, that could be for this, or that could be for that character doing that, and just your perception of what it is that you're hearing stimulates your creativity to maybe go a different direction on the story, or fill in a blank that you didn't have before. So I've watched it in you, and I'm sure music does this, a lot of people, the same way reading a book, without the benefit of a movie or the imagery. You're reading a book, your brain conjures up everything from atmosphere to creativity to the setting that the book is trying to portray. But the music can do the same thing for you, can really stimulate your creativity. And I've watched you develop your story through listening to some of this music.
Well, I think I could share it here too. And it would go along with the Sunland piece that we had. I just one little slide on Sunland. But I've been working with Joe because I started doing the songs because I felt stuck at how to make the novels I was working on more lyrical. And I thought, well, maybe if I can write one song, I can start making this more lyrical. And we've probably written 20 or 30 songs since that time. And there is now this sound that I associate with Songland. And sometimes Joe will create something and it will inspire me in a different direction. And it will help me if I'm stuck on things. Now, you don't necessarily have to have your own composer composing your own music for you. I also listen to certain, like the song Kashmir from Led Zeppelin was something that helped me compose a certain sequence of events for the Songland, actually a big sequence of events. So it doesn't have to be something someone else composes for you, but if you have the luxury, like I do, of working with someone on music for your stuff, you can create your own sound, which is a wonderful thing to be able to do. And it really does. Oh, well, and here's the slide. So for me, I've been using music to help me with a creative project. And I could imagine a lot of people using music in April to help you finish a project, start a project, or do something differently with what you're wanting to create in the world. Songland is a series of books, actually, of fantasy sci-fi books that let's hope I will actually get out at one of these points. It's getting close on the first book that I feel finished with it and ready to start whatever the publishing process looks like on that. But all along, Joe and I have been writing songs, and now we're writing a symphony from the first novel, pulling different songs together. I don't know if it's a symphony, it's more like a medley at this point, but the dream I have is that it becomes a symphony. So it's just a lot of fun to work with him. I don't know where we're going to go with Songland, but for you, you might choose to do something a little different. And so these are the kinds of things that Joe and I have been doing, and we're going to keep doing this year. We've already thrown out a few monthly meditative videos, and they're taking music that I think I planned all music that we've done before from years past and kind of doing it in a different way. I'm going to be doing, I think, some solstice retreats, and we're going to have some music with that. And there's going to be some seasonal collections and then excerpts of this symphony we're working on that we'll be sharing with everybody in the group from time to time. I hope by the end of the year we'll have some kind of restorative musical celebration, but this is what we're hoping to provide you in our collaboration on the Mindful Earthkeeper in 2021. And then I just want you to stay tuned to our Earthkeeper newsletter to hear more. You'll get the video. And we're also hoping to just keep interacting with you, having some other videos and having fun with this. I don't know if you have anything else you wanted to add, Joe.
I'm sorry?
Did you have anything else you wanted to add?
No, I love how music interacts with creativity and restoration too. I mean, it's very integral language to achieve a lot of that stuff. So.
Well, and I think it goes, because we're talking about resource mapping in another session, or actually in the month of March is when we really focused on that. To me, music is a resource, and it really does across many of the things in the 4 quadrants I have of inner, outer, legacy, and organic. Maybe it's not so much this natural world piece, but in our case, because we're doing some things with the natural world, it can even be that. But music can be this inner and outer resource, and it can certainly leave a legacy if you're creating music, as we are trying to create ourselves. So thank you so much for listening to yet another Mindful Earthkeeper collaborative video, and we'll have some more throughout the year. And so I'm glad you're getting to meet Joe, my favorite composer, and we'll keep in touch. And let me say goodbye from here. We'll say goodbye from this screen.
Goodbye. Thank you, Karen.
Bye-bye.